Okay, y'all know what else I brought.
Yeah.
And we live. Happy Wednesday and welcome to another Everybody Can't Go Convo. I'm your host, Jessi Holley, and today I have a special treat for you guys as we are interviewing Albert Bramante. Now, for over 2 decades, he's been deeply involved in the realms of entertainment and education, helping performers and students to unleash their potential in a mix of psychology, strategy, and tech. As the CEO of Bramante Artists, he focuses not only on strategy, but he has also had booking roles in crafting endearing careers and psychological insights throughout the industry. And he's also created impact in learning experiences grounded in real life application, which y'all know we like some real life application around here, not just all the good stuff. And he's also had teaching roles at Union County College, as well as the Borough of Manhattan Community College within the City University of New York system. So, with all of those accolades and things, welcome, Albert. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really am happy to be here and honored to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, even with that brief bio that I gave everyone, give us an introduction to who you are as a person. Like, let us know more about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've always been very complex. Uh, I would consider myself to be a sort of a really, I guess you could say, a lucky outcast. So when I say I was an outcast, I grew up in a family that was predominantly into athletics and, blue collar. And my father, my brothers, I'm the youngest of five, were all into sports and all into athletics and all into the typical stuff that any normal, typical male would be interested in. That didn't do anything for me. And they tried, putting suiting me up for football, putting a bat or putting a glove in my hand and trying to get me. No, I had no ability, and I really didn't want to do it. I didn't want to, and I had no ability. And I think they thought initially there was something wrong with me. They wanted to toughen me up, because this was really back in the old school early '80s where it was like, men had to be, tough, and so that was that. Grr, yeah, not happening with me. But I love to read. And so that's something none of my family really liked to do. So, but I love to read, and so I grew up with being around library and being around books. I think that's sort of like why I, gravitated towards the higher education, and because I love knowledge and I love reading and I love learning about learning, new things. And so I spent most of my time in the library in high school, junior high and high school. I was your typical nerd, bookworm nerd, loved to read. And so I think that just led me down the path of higher ed. And that led me down the path of psychology because I reading a lot of books about the brain, the mind, therapy books, relationship type books, mental health themed. And so that really opened up my eyes and interest in psychology. But I was also interested in the arts too. So I in college, both in high school and college, I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities that were drama related. I even took a couple of acting classes in college as electives, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And then one of my my only professional internship was in New York at a talk show. So I got to intern at a talk show, which was exciting. And that was like my first foray into like professional show business. I realized after that internship experience, while I was immensely grateful for it, I never want to work or go near Talk TV ever again. So, but that kind of started the snowball effect of where I am now today. Because of that experience, this is right around the time of 9/11, we started a charity. Some of the people I was working with, Sal, just Raphael, we started a charity and social service organization to help with 9/11 survivors, their families, rescue workers, family members of those that were affected, as well as direct rescue workers that were affected with with PTSD and all of that trauma. So I started working with more actors again. And so that kind of reignited. And this was a few years after I graduated from college, because I just finished my master's degree, that theater became a possibility again. Acting became a possibility. So I pursued it a little bit as an actor. Realized it wasn't for me, but I loved being around actors. I loved being around creative people. Not just actors, but producers, writers, directors, stage managers, whatever it was. If you worked in the creative industry, I felt much more connected to you than I did other academics. And so that kind of, slowly led me down the casting to eventually starting my first comp talent agency in 2004, 21 years ago. And that's when my first foray into managing goes. Now, I was also going for my PhD, and I was also teaching at Union County at this time, part time. And one thing I was noticing, both from an agent standpoint and from a college professor, was the theme of self sabotage kept coming up, self doubt, self
Mhm.
sabotage, especially with actors and even with students too that were really smart, really bright, really talented, but just not applying themselves. Not caring about their education, not applying themselves. And so it really helped me down the line into really focusing on self sabotage. And so that's what I did my doctoral thesis on, dissertation on, with self sabotage, which later became my book that was released last year, Rise Above the Script, because it deals with over, overcoming self doubt, mastering self sabotage. So that's sort of like and that's where I started like doing a lot of guesting on podcast in different spaces, because that's an area where I'm really passionate about and knowledgeable about, in a sense.
Mhm. Okay, so that leads me right into actually my first question. You've kind of started to breach on that. With working with a range of performers, actors, speakers, and all types of different creatives, what are some of the most common mental blocks? I know that you've mentioned self-sabotage so far. And then let's see, let's give us the top three common mental blocks that you see. So self-sabotage, and give us two others. And then where do those blocks usually come from?
Sure, I'm glad you asked that. I would say fear of success and imposter syndrome, which actually kind of work together and lead to self sabotage. So, what very often happens, especially with performing arts and show business, which for anybody who's not familiar with it, it is a very exciting industry. It's really invigorating, and it's great to be a part of. But it is also immensely competitive, extremely competitive, and extremely difficult to thrive in. So you're gonna, as an actor, especially if you're an actor in New York, LA, or Atlanta, there, the competition is so intense and immense that there's several, actually several hundred thousand in the United States that are actors. You compare that with only a small handful of roles, that it's estimated, but even according to the Screen Actors Guild statistic, that only 98% of all actors are going to be are not working. So it's only 2% that are working. So it's a really, the odds are initially, if you look at it, stacked against the actor, no matter what talent level they're at. So I think after a while, getting told no, it's going to often wear them down, because when an actor auditions, they're kind of like being vulnerable and bearing their soul, and then to be told no over and over again eventually starts to create the self doubt. This imposter syndrome coming in and saying, well, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right field for me? And then you get their family pressures. Their family doesn't understand, especially if they're not a family in the arts. Come on, you're trying as acting for 6 months, it's not working. Do you think maybe, you know, try to get a real job? And so they hear these messages over and over again. And a combination of that as well as the um, trauma of like being told no over and over again. And then you add that in, and this is varies from actor to actor, but if you have already, let's say, a background, a previous history of trauma, which you'd be surprised how a lot of people find healing and acting. So a lot of times, some actors are somewhat already dealing with some fragility due to some previous trauma
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe unresolved. So you add all of that on top of that, and then that's a recipe for a chaos. And then with fear of success, which is not often talked a lot about. This is something that I really discovered, in my studies, in a sense that I didn't even know it really existed when I was in school or anything like that when I was an undergrad. Never really heard the word fear of success, and until it became a real issue. So, with one of the things as human beings, we fear change, and we fear anytime our life is going to change, it's fearful because we don't want to change. We want to stay the same. We want to stay comfortable. We want to stay in the same routine. So fear of change. Now, if you're going to become successful, especially as an actor, there's going to be a whole host of other pressures that are going to be in addition to what I just said. Um, Life is going to change. Relationships are going to change around you. Um, You're going to have a lot of jealous people in your life, sometimes even family. And then there's going to be a lot of chaos there, and a lot of performance is going to be demanded of you because if you get, let's say, a Broadway show or a lead in a movie or lead in a TV series, you're talking 6, 7 days a week of work with 10 to 12 hour days, and that's a lot of time to be away. And then not only that, but then you got to do publicity stuff, you got to do interviews, you got to do parties, you got to be at all these other types of press events in addition to the role that you're playing. So there's a lot of intense scrutiny there, and a lot of actors are not necessarily equipped with that initially in the beginning. So there's a lot of resources that actors are not prepared for. Both the demands of the field, and then also what happens if you get the role. And and what happens with fear of success is it's not so much the that we fear the event, but we fear the consequences of that of getting that. Now the more higher expectations, the changing of identity now. So that's going to often create a lot of internal chaos and internal struggle, which leads to again the fear of success. So that is sort of how it all ties in together. So a lot of factors, and just the fact that most actors are empaths or really highly sensitive already.
That's very, very interesting. And I love the way you talked about the triangulation of those three things. The concept of the fear of success itself, that really hits home for me in some of the things that we talk about here at Everybody Can't Go Convos when we're talking about growth and moving up to your next level and going after your goals, building your vision, the person that you will have to become. And we haven't delved too much into actually being afraid of what does the next level look like for an individual and some of those nuances in there. So I know for the listeners, there were quite a few nuggets to take notes on. And that answer to the question there, because there are so many things to consider as you are on a path to growing into the person that you're designed to be becoming, and as you are evolving and changing so that you're not only equipped to like get to the next level, but also to be able to handle it and maintain that next level that you get to, as well as to continue to grow. Because you will definitely, there are a lot of ways that you can lose out once you become the person that you need to be to get to the next level. If you then say, oh, well, I'm here now, I've got the things, I've walked into the rooms, I've achieved that thing, so I can go back to my old habits. Well, when you go back to those old habits, it brings you back to that level that you were at when you had that last set of habits.
Yeah.
And it really does require becoming a new version of yourself or an upgraded version of yourself in order to achieve all of the things that you set out to do.
Yeah. And I really love the name of the podcast because it really reminds me that when you start going up levels of success, not everybody can come with you, or it's because they're not going to be prepared to come with you. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, as painful as it is, you may have to let some people go in your life,
Yeah.
and that's not an easy thing to do. I know that from experience, and it's really not. And sometimes it has to be done. Now it may but have to be by your choice or by other people's choice. I was listening to so I'm not really into this person, but there was a well-known celebrity psychic medium that was being interviewed on TV one time, and he was saying that when he hit fame, a lot of his family stopped talking to him, like just completely, cut him out. And I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit more, maybe more to it than what we heard in the interview, but it does sound believable that if they're threatened by your success, that they can actually start distancing themselves from you. Um, One of the pivotal conversations I was having a long time ago with an actress I used to represent, um, she was very upset and distraught because the guy that she was dating, her boyfriend at the time, anytime she would mention any news about acting, he shot it down. He always was telling you need to get serious. You need to get serious and stop being, living this pipe dream of an actor. And, she came to me, I guess wanting for advice. Like, she's like, well, how can I get him to see my dream? And I said, well, let's unpack this a bit. I asked him, I said, do you feel that he's needy? She's like, all the time. I was like, so, and I kind of just hypothetically, I didn't suggest, I don't really outright suggest, but or demand, say that this is what's happening. I said, you think he could be jealous, or insecure, about the fact that, let's say you do land that role in that TV show, or you do land the lead that movie, and you're gonna maybe not need him anymore. And of course, she's like, she thought for a second, and she's like, I never thought about it that way. She goes, of course, I would never leave him. I really truly care for him. I said, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't perceive that. He doesn't understand that. And it's really not your position, believe it or not, to change his point of view. So, but I said, I just want you to think it's not you personally. So, and I don't know what happened. I think like within a few months, after that, they were no longer together. But that's a reality. I think that reminds of the whole thing that everybody can come with you. Um, and you got to be prepared for that. No, ideally, you want everyone to come, the people that matter at least to come with you, but
Mm-hmm.
that may not happen all the time. So that's something to kind of like just be prepared for. That do you want to be stuck and comfortable, which is easy to do, and we can stay in the same lane we're at and do the same thing over and over again. It's comfortable, it's peaceful, but we're going to be miserable in the long run. Or do you want to take the chance to grow? It may be uncomfortable in the beginning or for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and it might even sting a bit in the beginning. Um, do you want to grow? And that's something that I often ask is like, what is it going to take? In a sense, for you to really change, and that may sometimes mean stepping, outside of your comfort zone, being vulnerable, being, just uneasy for a little bit.
That is very true. That is very true. That whole aspect of releasing people and communicating in a healthy way, that's the part that it is and can be very uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Only about 12% of the world is equipped to even be that type of leader where, and even within that 12%, it may still bother you when you have to make those decisions, when you have to make those changes, when it's time for
Yeah.
somebody to not be able to go with you. And
Yeah.
the in that the only thing that you owe to anyone else is really just to communicate with them with respect, maintaining integrity, and communicating with them in a healthy way. You don't get to dictate, how they respond. And I love that you pointed out it was not this young lady's job to make her spouse feel a different way. His feelings were his feelings. And it was her responsibility to be aware of it, but you can't manage the other person's feelings or manage the other person's reaction to your actions. You can only control you and what it is that you're doing and what you're putting out into the world. So, yeah, I really,
And that's a good point. And you mentioned something about leadership. And I hear this a lot. I heard this a lot from people who've ranked up, in the company, or that, let's say they got a major promotion and they became CEO. Maybe they were like mid-level employee, and then they really get catapulted to leadership. And I think I was reading. I forget the name of the company, but I was reading an article in the New Yorker a while back, and this woman who got promoted. She was before she got promoted. She was very popular. She was out. They would with their coworkers. They would always go out for drinks, happy hour, and they would talk all the time. Well, she got promoted and now became a supervisor for them. And she realized when it first happened, everyone was like, "Yay, congratulations, we're going for drinks, we're going to celebrate." But one by one, what she noticed was everyone stopped calling her, stopped inviting her out, and even started shunning her even. And one of the things that and this, I mean, it's still to this day in 2025. It used to be when I was growing up, a lot of women definitely face discrimination, especially if they move up the ranks, because what did most people suspect if she went, climbed the ranks? Well, who did she sleep with? Well, she said the rumor started, but what she found utterly more surprising in this article stated was it wasn't the male colleagues that were spreading the rumors that were sleeping over to the top. It was the other female employees, and I was like, that was eye opening because that surprised me. I would suspect sometimes men being threatened by a female rising, but no, that she said the males were more supportive of her going up the ranks than that. I thought was a little surprising, but makes sense now a little bit. But it goes down to insecurity, and I think that that's where that comes in. So you're not. That's a possibility when you go into leadership. You got to be prepared that yeah, not everybody's going to come with you on that one, especially if you had friends within the company. Um,
yes, that is for sure.
when I'll even give you an example. My mom was a first-grade teacher for years. The first year of teaching, everyone was so when she first started teaching, everyone was so supportive until she won on her first time teaching, first year Teacher of the Year award. No, people were not happy, and kind of started to shun her away. And now, I mean, I know now, of course, as a psychologist, that makes sense. People are threatened by other people's success because they're operating out of their own insecurity. But it's not our responsibility to work through somebody else's insecurity. It's not our responsibility to change someone's insecurity. So we're not, just like with my client, my former client, or even with that lady in the article, I would tell them both to even over and over again, it's not your responsibility. I'm sorry that happened. That's all I can say is, but you just have to keep going and doing you, and you'll find better friends. Even if you have to find friends outside of your organization, you'll do it.
That is,
Yeah,
that is very
fine.
true.
Yeah. So not everybody can come up. Not everyone's going to be aligned with you, and that's going to be. there has to be a moment where we have to be okay with that.
Yes, definitely. And a part of being okay with that, um, until you get okay with that fact and get okay with having those open spaces and empty spaces for new friends to fall into, you'll kind of be stuck in the cycle of, again, you have to have the room for those new friends. You have to have the emotional space. You have to have the mental capacity. You have to be emotionally healthy to be vulnerable, be open, and also be accepting of those new people that will be coming in, not to be jealous of your accolades or be jealous of your next level or that promotion that you received, that award, any of those things, but to enter into new communities of people who everybody's winning. So anytime you're bringing your good news to the table, it's like everybody's like, oh my God, yes, that's what's up. If there is competition, it's like healthy, fun competition. You don't even have to be in the same industry. Like, that is awesome. You got the Teacher of the Year award. I'm going to raise your Teacher of the Year award. Let's go out to dinner to celebrate. I have great news for you. While we're celebrating you, this is what happened, what's going on in my world. And you guys are able to actually celebrate together, celebrate those wins to pour into one another versus just kind of like, oh, well, that's good for you.
Yeah.
And it's like later you're kind of just like, oh, well, what about me? And I love that you talked about, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother podcast right there. Not operating out of other people's insecurities. Because again, you don't get to control how someone else feels or their feedback or their reactions to your success, your accolades, your next level that you've been working on this thing. You could have been working. I mean, for example, with you and your doctorate degree, you don't just get a doctorate degree going to school for a year and a half. That's not a 2 year project. Sometimes it's not even a 4 year project. But what everyone gets to see is they get to see that awesome stamp of I'm now Dr. Albert, if you choose to use the title. You get your 1 day of graduation. You get to post some photos with your cap and gown. You have your degree. You have one piece of paper that shows or represents a culmination of years of work, of coursework, of research, of writing, of going through iteration after iteration of your dissertation. And people don't get to see all of that work that you put in for that one moment of glory or that one moment of celebration. And like, even with that, by the time you get to that moment where it's time for you to receive your accolade, you get to that endpoint, like, you really, like, why waste any of your energy on the naysayers or on any negativity when you're the one that knows how long and how much work you had to put in on this thing? No one else stayed up half the night with you for countless nights because
Oh,
you don't end up counting how many nights you didn't go to bed until 3, 4, or 5 a.m. because you're like, let me just do one more page. I have to get this idea out of my head. Let me just go through 50 more pages of research. People weren't there for that. And to waste or even squander your moment on just worrying about the reactions of those people who they were asleep. They were asleep. They were chilling. They were partying. They were probably talking crap about somebody else while you were putting in the work. Never let anyone steal that moment from you.
absolutely. And that's why I think anytime people with titles use them because you've earned it. You worked hard for it. And and it took me 10 years to get a doctorate. I mean, I've got a little sidetracked because I was working full time, and teaching. So, but it took me a long time to get it. And the one thing I will say to kind of like your thing about supporting each other, and I network people. I have friends that are other agents. Now, yeah, technically we're competition, but we're friends. And we
Mhm.
support each other. And the one thing about the acting community, at least in New York, is it's very supportive, and you'll see that among the actors that they have each other's back. And they're supportive. Even if they're competing for the same roles, they're still supportive. And I think that's the way to go. Like, we're all in this together. And that's the way that those are people we should all be striving to be around. Is people who will build each other up. There are moments of where we're going to be a spotlight. There's moments that they deserve to be in the spotlight, and we celebrate that and we support that. And um, one line that I really kind of talk about with naysayers is we're not responsible for somebody else's subconscious, you know,
Ooh,
feelings or expectations. We're not, and it's not our job to help someone else deal with their insecurity. Now we can be there. You can certainly have a lend a caring hand if somebody wants to get better. But if they don't want to evolve, it's not your responsibility. And that is a lot of hard for some people to experience or to understand. But that's the truth. And
mhm.
it'll be much liberating when you can say, look, okay, you know, I I'm here, but I've got to look out for me right now.
Yep.
I care about you. I love you. I'm here, but I need to focus on me right now. And again, some people may resent that. That that may happen, but that's not your problem or your concern. And that one statement that really I wish I knew when I was 18, my 18, year old self, or even my 21-year-old self. It's none of your business what people think of you.
Mm,
I was like, I wish that would have saved me so much anguish over the years. Because
mm,
I'm a recovering people pleaser. Like, that was just wanted, most of my early adult life was I wanted people to like me. Everyone to like me. That's not possible. No matter who it is. Um, no matter what happens, you're not, not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
mhm.
And you got to be okay with that. It's just the way it is, but you try to maximize those that do, because rather than maximize and focus your energy on those that support you. So another quote that I love, I didn't come up with this myself, is what you can say is be around people who celebrate you rather than people who tolerate you.
Mhm.
So
That's facts.
be around people who celebrate you, not tolerate you. So
Yes, for sure. That is definitely, look, that's part of the mantra around here. And sometimes people won't like you simply because a bunch of people do like you. And it's like, oh, well, what's so great to like? Well, you could come to the winning team or find out, or you could stay over there and keep being a hater.
yes,
So that that brings me to my next question for you. When you talked a bit about that people pleasing for performers or people who are on a growth journey that they feel like they've lost their voice creatively or emotionally, what's the first step that you recommend that they take so that they can begin to reclaim their voice so that they're able to show up?
I would say the first thing is reconnect to your passion. What is it that you're really passionate about? Why, for somebody into acting, why did you get into acting? What made you enjoy acting? So much. Really, what got you into this? And really kind of connect to that and just even meditate on that. Like, what really got you into doing this? And staying true to that, because very often people lose focus again because of relationships, because life stressors. And so the important thing is to reconnect, or at least rekindle that initial spark that got you into that, or that led you into this area. So connecting to your initial spark is extremely important. That would be really the kind of like the first step. And again, now the next step might be then we need to do an audit of your day to day life. What exactly? Who are you being around? What um, maybe you do need to cut some toxic things out of your life, whether that's people, food, habits that are draining you. So let's figure out what are the time wasters, the time drainers, and let's eliminate that. So that's the next step. And then you'd be surprised when people just wake. It's sometimes just doing those two steps alone, people awaken. It's like I'm awake, I'm alive again,
Mhm.
and they kind of come back reconnected to it. And at some point, maybe there's some aspect of performing that or style of performing that may not resonate with you anymore. And maybe that might mean walking away. I mean, at the end of the day, but ideally, we want to try to get you. The first step is to try to really rekindle that fire that's within you and revive that. Now, again, that might necessarily it might mean changing focus or changing directions in a sense. If that's what makes you happy, go for it.
That I like that concept. It reminds me of going back to your roots. And the way that I frame it to anyone that I coach, and sometimes here on the pod, what I say is go back to what was that dream that you had before anybody else had an opinion on what you're doing or anybody else told you what you should be doing, how you should be acting, what you should think, and what you should give up or stop trying. Because a lot of times we don't realize how much of our own voice is actually our internal of what other people have said to us. It's not even our voice on the inside anymore. We've actually lost our own voice and have replaced it with all of those things that everybody else said, all of that stuff that they say, which y'all know we've been looking for they since episode 1 and we have not found out who they is yet. I will pay somebody to tell me who is they. But we take all of that stuff that they say or they said, and that becomes our voice when it's like, no, that's really, you're just ingesting things and regurgitating back what
Mhm.
other people have told you to think and how other people have told you to operate.
Right.
So getting back to that beginning stage that you just talked about is digging deep and really thinking about what you're thinking about and going back to what is your purpose and what are your true desires aside from what everyone else wants for you.
Yeah, and that going back to what you were saying, what they say, a lot of times it's the inner voice, the inner critic that's really talking, and there's no real source of that. So one thing that we kind of use um, when I work with people or coaching is, well, I'm really not meant to do this. Well, really, who told you that? Um, I can't do this right. Well, who said you can't do that?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they can't answer that. I'm like, I can't do anything right. You mean anything right? You've got up today. You're functioning. You've done something right. Or everyone. The best is like when people generalize. Everyone thinks this is a dumb idea. You mean you tell me you've interviewed every person on the planet? The other 8 billion people, and they told you this is a bad idea. This is great. And they'll laugh because I'm like, because maybe they asked one or two people and they thought it was not a good idea. Everybody thinks, okay, no. So what happens very often is from a mental standpoint, we delete, we distort, and we generalize. So we generalize and we distort and blow things out of proportion. Um, like for example, my actors didn't get the role. Oh, this casting director, this producer director doesn't like me. And I'm like, so did they come out and tell you I don't like you? No. Well, then you got me the role. I'm like, um, that was a role. It's not about whether they like you or not. It's who fits the role. And so we generalize and then we distort the good things that or delete the good things that happen. And we don't even focus on that because another thing I often do is have people journal. What are the good things that you've done over the past year? What are all the accolades you received, whether it's praise, whether it's, thank yous or testimonials. And a lot of people come back and say, well, I had a much longer list than I thought because we tend to delete the good stuff. We have we do have a negativity bias, which again is rooted partly our survival brain, part of our ancient survival reptilian brain. And, most people, when they get, let's say they get 20 compliments, and then you get one or two criticisms or even scathing remarks, most of the time you're going to be forgetting about the good things, and you're going to be so focusing on those two scathing results. And I can relate to this too, because myself and other teachers do this. When, at least at a collegiate level, we get evaluations every semester from students. Students evaluate us anonymously about our teaching effectiveness. Now, this kind of really led me to the whole expression that you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Because usually 80 to 85% of my evaluations are five and above, like the highest rating. And I will get a handful that are mediocre and also a handful that are low numbers. And even sometimes some scathing remarks. Now, when I was going back to my people pleasing age when I first started, I would be distraught. And then I'd even have people pointing out to you, like, but look, you may have had 8 people review negatively, but you also have about 60 that are rating you on 5 out of 5. I almost forgot those, because I was so focused on the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's another thing we have to really work out, programming ourselves out of is taking the even the negative stuff and, you know, first of all, reducing the emotional charge from it. But the second thing is extracting anything useful out of it. Because even when I went back after I kind of calmed down, I would look at the evaluations again, and some of the even the comments may have been delivered negatively. I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe I'll do this differently next semester. Okay, there's something here that I can do differently. Great. It may have been in a rambling, venting state, but it was a maybe a helpful suggestion there that I wasn't looking at because it was so. Oh, I got a one. What do I do? And then I looked at it. I'm like, well, it makes a partial sense, 20% true. Okay, so what can I do from that? And what can I take from that? So being open to feedback is also important. Now, a lot of times people that are offering the feedback that's constructive might not deliver it the most tactful ways. So sometimes it's not like when people criticize us and we get insulted, it's not so much what was said, but a lot of times how they say it. Just people may not have the tactfulness of how to deliver feedback, so it can come across as biting and rude and insulting, and we get insulted, but maybe that was not always their intention. So as I was going kind of beforehand, we don't know, a lot of times people just don't have the delivery mechanism for that. So that's sort of like where I would go with that is a lot of times it's not so much the the message because a lot of times we do need to improve. So feedback is helpful. So anybody listening, even if you're in a supervisor position, one thing I would kind of even suggest is if you're trying to give someone feedback, don't say, "Hey, can I give you some constructive criticism?" No, I don't want to hear constructive criticism. But hey, this is a great idea, but can I give you some feedback? It's a little different now. Okay. Did you think of it this way? So, because nobody wants to be criticized. When you say constructive criticism, all you're doing is putting a little bow on the criticism.
That is so true. So as you're talking about the different criticisms and internalizing that the negative reviews, how does that fear of failure or that the feeling of rejection show up in performance as actors are taking the stage or going for a interview or going to a casting call or anything like that? And for you guys listening, I want you to think about how failure or rejection shows up in your performance at work, in your relationship, in your friendships, between yourself and family members, friends, different things like that. So, how does that show up in performance? And then, what are the mindset shifts that can quickly help people to move from paralysis to being pregnant?
So the one thing, especially from a performance aspect, or even if you're looking for a job and you don't get the job you want, you apply, you interview, you don't get the job. So why don't we look at things as there's no such thing as rejection? Just a simple a simple message that our services are not needed today.
Hmm.
So if you look at it saying your services are not needed today, that's much better than saying, oh, they rejected me, they don't like me. And that's such a negative connotation to it. Um, they, there's only one person who can get the job, and if there's 50 applicants, 100 applicants, only one person can get it. So that just might mean that tomorrow things may be different.
That's really cut and dry, like getting straight to the point of it. And I am going to use that from now on. My services just aren't needed today. That is that shuts it down super quick because it's like, okay, move along, take rest, and get to your next thing.
And it takes the personal thing out of it. It takes the personal feeling out of it. It's not personal. And so there's no rejection. You weren't rejected. You were just weren't right to this project, this, thing. Or even, if you're dating in the dating world, this person wasn't right for you.
Hmm.
It wasn't the right option for you. Keep going. And that's the one thing too, I would say is, just keep going. Keep doing it the next day. Keep pursuing whatever it is you're pursuing. And eventually something will happen, something will stick. But the important thing is not to take it personally. And as much as it may seem like it is, it's not. And that's the way to adapt from that and not to be in that paralysis of it is like, look, it's not personal.
That's really good. I love that. That's a whole t-shirt. That's a whole book. That's a whole nother pie. So my last question for you for today is, can you share a breakthrough moment for yourself or from your coaching where yourself or someone pushed through a major block and what changed for them on the other side of it?
Well, a major block, I would say, I'll even speak for me, one of the things that I always say is have confidence in yourself. So when I first was hired at Union County College, I had no training, no warning, and I don't know if you give an example what I meant by no warning. I did put my resume in a while back, like a couple of years before they called me, and I put my resume in. I just see my master's degree. 2 years later, I got a call the day after Labor Day, and we would love to meet you. Do you have time to come down? Sure, I did. So I went to Union County College. I went into the psychology department, and they asked me, like, do you have availability? Sure. Without a doubt, they go, you're hired. And I went, okay, you start tomorrow. Here's your books, because at that time two professors had walked out of their classes. So it was like the day before we couldn't really change books. And I wouldn't didn't really have a clue. Like, here's the book. Here's the books for the classes. Here's a class list. Good luck. I had a night before to prepare a syllabus. I had no idea what I was doing. Because with college professors, there's no training. There's no like in secondary school, you get teaching degrees and years of education. There's nothing for college professors as far as training is concerned. So I had no orientation in the college. I had no idea what anything was on campus. So I just said, okay, I'm gonna go with it and devise a syllabus. And I just started channeling my old professors, what I liked and what I didn't like. And I started I was like, I'm going to do what I liked and not do what I didn't like. But I'm also going to be myself. And was I terrified? Oh, yeah. When I got in front of those classes, terrified. The end of the semester rolled around. I started getting so much feedback. I loved this class. I loved it. This was a great class. How long have you been teaching? You must have been teaching for a while. And the one thing I never did, I never told anybody in those classes that this was my first time. I just played along. And it 22 years later, I must have done something right because I'm still teaching. So, but the important thing is to trust yourself and trust your instincts. And when a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't know if I can do it," you can. You got this. That's like one of my favorite things I'll tell people. You got this because I had, if I went, and most people can do something. Just put your mind to it and remember your training. Because even though I might not have a formal teacher training, I had formal experience dealing with people. I had a lot of training in psychology. So I was already ready. It was just really by the fire. Here you go. Sink or swim, at moment. And I swam, and to this day, I don't have any doubt. And writing my book would be the next, I would say, probably the biggest thing too, because I always told people since 2017, I'm going to write a book. And then 2023 rolled around. There's no book.
Hmm.
I would sometimes sit in front of my computer, write a couple of paragraphs, delete them because I get so mad. And I had a mentor tell me two things. Well, one, only 1% of people who want say they want to write a book actually write a book. 99 people out of every 100 don't write that book. I was easily becoming that 99. Number two, write first, edit later. Don't even worry about what you write, just write. And so that advice was gold for me. I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and eventually I had a manuscript, and I hired a professional editor, and it became a result. And now I have a book, and it's surreal to actually be holding a book with your name, with the title and name of your book, with your name in your hands. So that to me is another breakthrough. So the important thing is to take action. So trust yourself and take action. Because again, if I can do it, so can everybody else who's listening.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I too, I know exactly what you mean on being on that journey of writing a book and it being a bit longer than what you had originally anticipated. My book itself, Everybody Can't Go, was written years ago. But there were so many other things that I did around the book becoming a brand and then becoming an entire movement, starting the podcast, starting to do workshops, doing coaching, and so many other ancillary things that were all a part of the book and connected to it. The more I wrote and the more I was coached through writing the book, the more ideas came out of it, the more, just all of these different branches of the company and of the brand started to come out of it. And so I'm like, okay, we're finally finishing up on actually getting the book itself that birthed all of these other aspects of the brand. It's like, all right, the book is finally here. Like the book is finally actually coming out. And there are all of these other awesome things to show for it. But for those people who get to be introduced to me via the book, for them, it'll be like, oh, great. There's all this other ancillary stuff that they'll be able to access my interview with you and a ton of others. They'll be able to go back, look at past workshops and a bunch of different other things that were all born out of the concepts from the book, the lessons from the book, and even on the journey with there being so many other lessons and things that I've learned along the way that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm already ready to write the second book. So, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So, we've actually made it through my entire interview question list for you. You've definitely provided us with a wealth of knowledge today, and there are just so many other concepts that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to rewatch this episode and do some more research on this topic, on that topic, and I'm sure at some point I will be tapping you to come back so that we can talk some more. Awesome, awesome. So in closing, do you have any programs or anything coming up? And how do people find you on socials?
So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Bramante. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Those are two platforms I'm really active on. Feel free to reach out if you have anything I can maybe help you with. We can jump on a call with the discovery call, 10-minute discovery call. I'd love to jump onto you. Go to my website, albertbramante.com, which will be Right now, I'm working on developing a coaching program to become your best, authentic self. But I also have a lot of recordings available for you, for meditation and on different topics. So feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to jump on a call with you or just even have a conversation over DMs, direct messaging, and we can have, if you need help or need some clarity.
All right, awesome. So you guys heard them, and you know that I'm going to have all of those links and handles down there in the show notes for you so that you'll be able to find Dr. Albert on Instagram, LinkedIn, and at his website. And feel free to use all of those channels. And of course, like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone that you think it may really resonate with, or if they like it. And if you're the person that received this episode, please do subscribe to our channel here and follow us on socials on Instagram at Everybody Can't Go Convos Pod. And you can also check out what's going on with the brand at www.everybodycg.com. And we thank you guys so much for joining in with us and for watching another Everybody Can't Go Convo. Make it a great week, you guys.